Hello everyone, have a nice day. Today we will explore how Jack and Tu Tien follow a trail of silence to the airport, where Miss Thu's sudden escape exposes hidden cash and a deeper betrayal. If you find it interesting, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos. The zipper sounded louder than it should have. In the tiny airport office, under harsh white lights, Miss Thu's suitcase sat on the table like it had never done anything wrong. A simple rectangle of fabric, a travel tag, a handle worn smooth by hands that knew how to leave. But when the officer pulled the zipper open, the room held its breath. Tu Tien's eyes stayed locked on the suitcase, because that's where the silence lived, folded into clothes, tucked behind souvenirs, buried under the kind of nothing people use to hide everything. Jack didn't move. He stood beside her, close enough that his shoulder warmed hers, close enough that she could feel his calm like an anchor in the storm. "Please," Mom Loy whispered behind them, voice thin. "Please, let it not be what I think." No one answered her, because the suitcase was answering instead. A corner of bundled cash flashed under a folded black shirt, tight bands around stacks like the money had been strangled into obedience. And in that moment, the weeks of unanswered calls finally had a shape. A suitcase, a silence you could carry. Tu Tien's stomach dipped. Not because she was surprised she'd felt the truth coming for days, but because she could hear Mom Loy's heartbreak breaking again, quietly, right behind her. Jack's hand found Tu Tien's, fingers threading through hers without ceremony. A promise without words. "I'm here. Stay with me." The officer's voice was careful. "We'll need to verify everything. One step at a time." And just like that, Tu Tien's mind snapped back to where this began, before the suitcase, before the zipper, before the silence became evidence. Back to the security gate, 3 steps from escaping. Miss Thu had been in line like any other traveler. Red blouse inside, black coat outside, passport in hand, suitcase angled like a shield. People around her laughed, scrolled, checked the time. The airport hummed like it didn't believe in the consequences. Then Thu looked up. Her eyes met Jack's. For half a second, her face stayed composed, but her body betrayed her. A tiny pause. A tightening of fingers. The smallest flinch of someone who just realized the past caught up faster than she planned. She slid out of line. Tu Tien saw it first. "Jack, I see," Jack murmured, already moving. He didn't run. He didn't shout. He simply stepped into motion the way he did when a bridge design failed inspection, quietly, precisely, determined to stop the collapse before it killed anyone. Thu drifted into the crowd, switching lanes like she was searching for a faster check-in, blending into rolling luggage and moving shoulders. But Tu Tien watched the way her head turned, the way her eyes kept scanning for exits. That wasn't travel. That was escape. Tu Tien's heart hammered as Jack guided her forward. He kept his voice low, calm enough to lend her his control. "Stay on my left," he said. "Don't panic." Tu Tien tried to breathe. "If she disappears, she won't," Jack said. "She's already carrying too much." Tu Tien didn't understand then. Not fully. But she remembered the heaviness in Thu's bag, the tension in her wrist, the way she held her suitcase like it was a secret that might spill. Cold proof. Hot chase. They moved through the hall, past a family struggling with a stroller, past a couple arguing softly in a language Tu Tien didn't recognize, past a teenager spinning a suitcase like it was a toy. Everything is normal. Everything is unreal. And in the center of it, Jack and Tu Tien chased a woman who had turned silence into theft. Jack lifted his phone and spoke with clipped calm. "Officer Tung, She's changed direction. Corridor, near restrooms. Tu Tien glanced at his shock and relief, tangled together. You coordinated already? Jack didn't look away from Thu's black coat in the distance. Last night. Tu Tien saw it again like a cutaway scene. Jack's office, dim with yellow light, papers spread like a battlefield bank, transfers, dates, amounts, screenshots of messages that stopped mid-conversation. Mom Loy's hands trembled as she pointed at the evidence of her own mistake. I thought she was helping me, Mom Loy had cried. She said she knew investors. She said she'd return in 2 weeks. 2 weeks became 3. Tu Tien whispered then, remembering how Mom Loy had stared at her phone like it was a lifeline. Jack's face had gone very still. How many calls? Mom Loy's voice broke. Dozens. Every day. Jack didn't scold her. He just exhaled, slow, like he was swallowing anger before it became something sharp. We stop this now, he said. And later, when Tu Tien tried to apologize for nothing when she said softly, I'm sorry your family has to carry this, Jack had pulled her closer. You're not the burden, he told her. You're the reason I stay human. Now, in the airport corridor, the crowd thinned. Thu turned into a quieter hallway near signage for restrooms and staff-only doors. The lighting turned harsher. The air felt colder. And Tu Tien's fear sharpened into instinct. This was where people ran when they believed no one was watching. Thu stopped behind a pillar, opened her bag for a heartbeat, and shoved something deeper inside. Fast hands, frantic movements, disguised as calm. Tu Tien caught the flash of money again, and her chest tightened. Jack's jaw clenched. There it is. 2 plainclothes officers appeared like they'd always belonged there, one ahead, one behind, closing the distance without drama. Ma'am, one said, voice polite. Please stop. Thu froze. She didn't scream. She didn't fight. She simply turned slowly, eyes sharp, scanning for a gap that wasn't there. And then Jack stepped into view. Thu, he said, voice low. Not loud. Not angry. Just heavy. Where were you going? Thu's lips curved into a thin smile that didn't reach her eyes. Jack, she replied, as if this were a coincidence. As if silence hadn't been her weapon for weeks. Tu Tien felt Mom Loy's pain like a tremor behind her ribs. The officer gestured. We'll need to check your documents and belongings. Thu's gaze flicked to Tu Tien, dismissive and cold. And she's... Jack's answer came instantly. The woman I chose. Tu Tien's breath caught not because it was new, but because it landed like a vow in the middle of a chase. Thu's smile sharpened. How romantic. Walk, the officer said. And the suitcase, heavy with silence, rolled forward. Toward the room with the zipper. Toward the moment the truth would finally be pulled open. The airport office smelled like paper and disinfectant, the kind of smell that makes every emotion feel exposed. Miss. Thu sat with her suitcase beside her, shoulders squared like she could still command the room. But the longer the officers laid out the evidence, photos, seals, forms, the more her confidence looked like a costume. Mom Loy stood near the doorway, trembling. She didn't step closer at first, like fear might turn the scene into a nightmare she couldn't wake from. Jack stayed between Mom Loy and Thu without making it obvious. A quiet shield. Tu Tien noticed, and something warm tightened in her chest. The officer's voice was steady. Ma'am, we have transfer records and a large amount of cash found in your luggage. We need an explanation. Thu's eyes flicked to the sealed bundles as if they belonged to someone else. You found money, she said lightly. Is that illegal now? Jack slid his folder forward cold proof with sharp edges. That money matches the timeline of what you took. You stopped answering the day the transfers ended. For the first time, Thu's gaze hardened. Your mother was desperate, she said. I offered her an opportunity. Mom Loie flinched as if slapped. An opportunity? Her voice cracked. I trusted you. I called you every day. Thu's face softened, just enough to be crueler. Because you wanted comfort, not truth. Tu Tien took a breath, fighting the urge to step in. She didn't want this to become a screaming match. She wanted clarity. She wanted the silence to finally speak. So why run? Tu Tien asked, calm but shaking at the edges. If it was a real investment, you would have explained. Thu's eyes turned on her. Because you people don't listen when you're afraid. Jack's hand found Tu Tien's again, grounding her. Answer the question, he said quietly. Thu leaned back, crossing her legs, trying to regain control. I wasn't running, she said. I was relocating. Jack's mouth tightened. With cash in your suitcase. Thu's jaw twitched. Cash is faster than banks. The officer scribbled something, expression unreadable. Mom Loie finally stepped forward. Her hands were shaking, but her eyes were locked on Thu now, wet and furious. Did you ever plan to return it? Mom Loie whispered. Thu didn't answer immediately. She looked at Mom Loie the way someone looks at a mistake they're tired of carrying. Then she said, flatly, I planned to survive. The words hit the room like ice water. Tu Tien felt Mom Loie sway. Instinctively, she reached out and supported her elbow. Mom Loie gripped Tu Tien's arm, clinging like she might fall apart if she let go. I'm sorry, Mom Loie whispered, not to Thu, maybe to herself. I was trying to protect this family, and I brought danger into it. Tu Tien shook her head gently. You're here now. That matters. Jack looked at Tu Tien just at a glance, but full of something intimate and fierce. Then he turned back to Thursday. Who helped you plan this? Jack asked. Thu's lips curved, a thin smile returning. You think I did all this alone? Jack didn't blink. Say the name. Thu's smile faded. Her eyes drifted toward the window, where the airport moved like a different universe. People boarding flights, chasing coffee, laughing into phones. Then she whispered, almost amused, check your circle, Jack. Someone enjoys watching you run. Tu Tien's skin prickled. The officer straightened. We will proceed with formal procedures. Ma'am, you will come with us. As the officers gathered the evidence bags, Tu Tien watched the suitcase being rolled away. Empty now, but still heavy with what it represented. Silence wasn't just missing sound anymore. Silence was strategy. Jack guided Mom Loie to a chair, then turned to Tu Tien. His voice softened for the first time in hours. You did well, he said. Tu Tien tried to smile, but fear lingered. What if she's right? What if someone else is? Jack reached up and brushed her hair back gently, a romantic touch that didn't belong in a police room, except it did, because it was how he kept her from breaking. Then we keep going, he murmured. Together. Tu Tien exhaled, leaning into him for half a second. Outside, a plane roared down the runway. And Tu Tien realized the chase didn't end when you caught the suitcase. Sometimes, that was only the beginning.
Hello everyone. In this episode, Jack and Tu Tien confront the mystery behind Mom Loie lost money after weeks of unanswered calls from Miss Tu. At the airport, they spot Tu in a red blouse under the flag coat, carrying a heavy suitcase and screening for exits. When Tu recognizes Jack, and she abandons the security line and tries to slip into quieter corridor, clutching her bag like a cigarette. Just careful preparation and coordination with plainclothes officers close the net, and two is escorted to airport office. Under harsh light, the suitcase is opened, revealing bundle cash that matches just cold-proof Jennifer receipts, dates and amounts. Unlike arrive devastated and demands the truth, but Tu refuses to fully confess, claiming she will survive and hinting someone else helped plan